Hello unicorns! Welcome back to another video. Just in case you are new, my name is Nathalie and this is my Cafecito y Pan Dulce YouTube channel where we have coffee talks about anything and everything. For today's video, it's actually going to be the beginning of a series that I'm going to be starting on my YouTube channel. It is called 5 Things I Learned from ... and for this episode, I'm going to be talking about 5 things that I learned from my Native American literature class, which I had this past semester. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about Native American literature, Native American culture, their history, and just kind of dive into some social justice issues, then please go ahead and keep on watching. So the first thing I learned is to not be quick to judge others' relationship with God. In the church that I grew up in, I was taught that no one is right besides us. I focused a lot in the Native American literature. I'm a biology major, so I love nature and I appreciate nature. And my relationship with nature is a connection that I have with God. It's something that helps me develop my relationship with God. And as we were reading the Native American literature, I've noticed that they have a really deep relationship with nature. There was like a deer ceremony after they hunted a deer. They would put cornmeal, blue cornmeal on its nose and say like, thank you because you've given us like this food and all of that. And I thought that was a really beautiful, respectful thing to do. I just started realizing all these like themes in the literature that we were reading. And one of the themes was their connection with nature. And I found verses so I'm reading from Job chapter 12 verse 7 and 8. But ask the animals and they will instruct you. Ask the birds of the sky and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth and it will instruct you. Let the fish of the sea inform you. And then I also noticed Romans chapter 1 verse 20. For his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen since the creation of the world, being understood through what he has made. As a result, people are without excuse. So this just goes to show how God manifests himself in nature. And so my conclusion is that by these verses and just like the feeling you get when you're surrounded by nature, it's a way for us to have a relationship with God. And Native Americans have that relationship with what they call a greater power, but it's a deep relationship with their greater power, which is what I would consider equivalent to God. So I think that sometimes we are very quick to judging that our way is the only way to God, and that's one thing that this semester taught me, was that we can't be quick to judge. We have to be able to understand the context, the history, and the reasoning why behind they do certain things. Number 2, I learned a little bit of what the heck was going through these European settlers' heads. I think that we learn about the cruelty that Native Americans experienced because of European settlers. We get told that there was confliction there, right? But I was always like, why would somebody think it's okay to treat somebody that way, you know? There were 3 reasons we talked about, and the first one was gold. People were in search of gold, money. That's what they were looking for. And then number 2 was God. Yes, that was actually an excuse for them. I didn't know this. We didn't even really talk about religion when it came to our history classes, if that was one of the reasons. Well, we didn't learn any of the reasons. So the European settlers saw it as they were entitled first to expand. God had entitled them to expand and look for more land. They also felt that they were doing the Native Americans a favor, that they were helping them get closer to God. Then there was also glory. So people were just searching for success and power that came along with the success. Does it excuse them? No, of course not. But it just gives us a little bit more of like that whole thing, like, what were they thinking? The third thing that I learned were all the hidden secrets that no one told us about. There were schools that they would force Native American children to go to, rob them of their culture. Literally, the book that I'm thinking of is by Zitkala-Sa. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. She talks about her experience. They would cut their hair, which was considered something that was considered cowardly in their culture. They would take all their clothes and make them wear more constricting clothes, the European fashion, but to them it was something that was so not like conservative. Like to them it was like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy, why would you wear such tight clothes? Because they were so used to wearing their traditional clothes that they would wear. Yes, they would force them to. In some cases it was voluntary, but most of the time it would be forced, and it would also, when it's voluntary, it's kind of like, what other option do I have? Native Americans, because they were minorities, and along with other minorities that were there at this time, would be forced to stand on the front lines of the wars. So the examples that we talked about were World War I and the Vietnam War. And because of that reason, they suffered from larger casualties and also a dramatic experience of PTSD. They would resort to alcoholism. They would get instituted during the early times that European settlers were coming over. They would rape the Native American women. There were leaders that would send the Native American women's husbands off to do whatever they were being sent off to do. And then during that time they would take advantage of their women, so their wives, their daughters, force them to have sexual intercourse and all of that. One important thing that I learned, that they are responsible for building a lot of our skyscrapers. Because Native Americans are faced with such injustices, they kind of didn't care about the risk of that they were taking when they were standing like 20 miles up high or however far it is. They didn't care about the risks, and so they were the ones that were building all the skyscrapers for us. Another thing that I learned was the power of alcohol in the culture, and that is something that we even see today, but also it was, like I said, something that they would resort to after they would come back from the war. And it became such a huge problem, alcohol, drugs, everything, because they weren't used to that. Number 4 is that this is still happening. So I was driving by the casino that I live by, and I realized that it said AA meeting at 7 p.m. For those of you that don't know what AA means, it's Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't realize that it was such a prominent thing. That is why the majority of Native Americans are in poverty and are suffering, because they face the same tragedies. There's also problems like injustices that other minorities face, so problems with the healthcare system. There was a big case with the Dakota Access Pipeline, and if you guys Google it, you'll find it. You'll see all the injustices that the Native American tribes that are in that area have faced, and I'll leave an article linked down below too. So number 5 was I learned of my appreciation and love for poetry. So this kind of ends on a little bit of a happier note, but it doesn't change the power that poetry has, and Native Americans are extremely talented with the poetry that they write, and a lot of it has to do with social injustices, and the power and meaning that those poems and that poetry carries is what made me fall in love with poetry in the first place. Just Google Native American poetry and you will find pieces that will break your heart and make you feel so many things all at once. So yeah, that basically concludes the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, found it helpful, learned a few new things about Native American culture and the struggles that they face now and have faced in our history. So I will leave the literature that I recommend that we read in our literature course down in the description bar, and I will also leave some links to some articles that are a little more up to date, talking about what's happening in Native American culture now. I think that it's important to remember to love God is to love everyone, and to love God or to love somebody is to also feel their pain and feel their suffering and sympathize with them, be compassionate towards them, want to speak up for them too. I will see you guys in next week's video. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video or learned something. That's everything. I'll see you guys next week. I love you guys so much, and thank you so much for supporting me and helping me and subscribing and all of that. So I'll see you guys next week. Bye! Let's just make it worse.